Jefferson Investor Day. It's April 21st. Both Melina and I have cards you can use to register. We've had a great turnout last year, over 300 people and 40 investors representing multiple funds. And several billion-dollar funds this year, too, actually, last year. So we are BioStrategy Partners. I am the president, Heather Rose. We are a consortium of all of the tech transfer, and innovation offices of these institutions. And I'm proud to announce here for the first time, we just added Blumberg Institute. So thank you so much for coming. We're really, really happy to have them in our network. They have some absolutely fantastic technology, and they're an important partner here for us. So if you don't know about BioStrategy Partners, as I mentioned, we're a consortium of all of the technology transfer offices for most of the regional health centers and academic centers. I would like to give a shout out to our sponsors right now as well. And also I'd like to give a very special thank you to BioLabs for helping us host these events on the regular. There you go. I think that's all you need to know. We've had a couple of changes on the panel, but they kept up with them. So I'd like to thank whoever put this slide together this fast. Unfortunately, Adam Van Dyke from Fox Chase and Justin Crotty both are dealing with flus in their homes. So we are changed out some people, but we all have actually kind of the same expertise. We have Dominguez Silva, who's a partner at Saul Ewing, and he specializes in intellectual property law. I've also had the pleasure of working with him now for over a decade, I believe. Zev Sunleaf here, he's our moderator, so let him start. And we still have Greg.
Zev Sunleaf, Tech Transfer and Research Contracting at Children's Hospital.
Greg Jackson, Executive Vice President of Life Science Greenhouse Investments.
Heather Rose, I'm the Vice President of Technology Licensing and Startups for Jefferson Health and Jefferson University, and as well the President of BioStrategy Partners.
Oh, hi, I'm Domingo Silva. As Heather said, we've known each other for a mighty long time, even before she was in Tech Transfer. And I'm a partner with Saul Ewing here in the Philadelphia office. I'm actually the chair of the IP group there. And my background is chemistry and biochemistry, and I practice in patent prosecution and client counseling, mostly in the life sciences.
Zev, over to you.
Hello, we're going to talk a little bit about tech transfer, how we can be of assistance to you, how our offices and our goals and our missions have changed. And it's interesting, as we were planning for this panel the other day, first question that came up is talk about how things have changed. And we're actually going to talk about the last 5 or 10 years, but I like to joke, I started in academic tech transfer 25 years ago. And I distinctly remember meeting with our then Vice President of Research at a different university, and he said, Zev, first of all, you guys will never make enough money to matter to us. We're a $3 billion enterprise. You'll never be even worth noticing. But I'm pretty sure we legally have to have your office for some federal laws. So please don't cost us too much money. Don't create startups that are a huge conflict of interest, and stay out of the paper. And that was his marching orders to us in 2001. So obviously, given panels like this and conversations and the growing field, that's changed a lot. But even more so in the last 5 to 10 years, when I started, it was all about can we file patents and can we license them to large pharma? That's no longer going to work. So we have really changed our offices over the last 5 to 10 years to be more than that. We are business development at an academic and hospital scale. It's about bringing in sponsored research. It's about really finding the ways to introduce our technologies and our PIs to the mechanisms that can help move these technologies out, as I like to say, to impact, in our case, the children they see each day. So all of our offices have changed in that way. And in fact, I joke, everyone didn't give a full, Dominic told you his scientific background, and they can tell you what their PhDs are in. I have zero scientific background. I fell into this by complete mistake. My only background educationally is business, but I've been in tech transfer for 25 years, and I ran 2 startups before that. So I come to it from the sort of, not transactional, but business and how to create partnerships. And so I'd like to hear from Heather how you've seen your office change over the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, really, actually, yeah. I mean, I think that that's such a great summary. When we were preparing for this panel, I got super excited. I posted on LinkedIn about it because I was really genuinely excited because we are living this. I mean, we are really, really living this. You guys have had such great success with some of your companies. And one of the things you said, Zev, that stood out to me on the panel is that when you're trying to get investigators truly committed to working with you, the value for them is getting their technologies to the people who need it. The value for the people we work with is understanding that there is a delta between getting their technologies to market and where they are right now, and that we can help them through the shoals of that. We can help them by getting them intellectual property protection, which is kind of the old standard, right? You go there, can I get a patent or not? If not, maybe you might queue them up for when they could come back or what they could do to get a patent. But now that's not the game anymore. That's not the game. Data is tremendously valuable now. It is, and when I say value, I mean value for patients the same way we were just talking about. I'm not talking about selling data, which is a conversation we had. We don't sell data. We do not sell patients' data, neither TJU nor CHOP. We use our data to save, help, and improve lives. So we are building collaborations that put in place the mechanisms to convert that data into true, meaningful information that will get a patient on the right immunotherapy earlier, that will make sure that somebody with a rare disease can actually get diagnosed quicker by looking through their medical records and those sorts of things. So we are finding new ways to find value in what we do, but the value is still the same. I think the value is still the same. I mean, how many of us really have those blockbuster things? It's great if it happens, but if we can get a technology taken from the lab to a therapeutic that's actually getting into people, that's the win. Yeah.
Yep.
That's what's remained the same.
So we've talked a little bit about how our offices, Greg is someone on the other side.
Yeah, he catches the baby.
Yeah, as the, not buyer, but the one who's trying to pull the technologies out. How would you say things have changed over the last 5 to 10 years?
It's changed substantially. As an early stage life science investor, previously we would talk to people on technology transfer, and they would try to be launching patents at you and not understanding why people don't want to invest in the patent. And with my interaction with many of you, tech transfer offices today are way more sophisticated, way more business oriented, understanding that there has to be a market need, market fit, having done work within the university to on their own, as well as partnering with organizations such as ours to try to develop that business case. Many years ago, I did spend a couple years sitting around a tech transfer office and watch some of this change, and people now understanding that they have to partner externally to understand there's really a market. It's not just a patentability decision and we get a patent and we hope that someone's going to license it or someone's just going to drop by and pay a fee for it. So doing that homework, really seeing these offices evolve where they're more mature in evaluating the business case and partnering with early stage investors and consultants, et cetera, to really build that business case around a technology even before they decide about the patentability. And it's I think it improves I think it helps the tech transfer offices not only prioritize their meager budgets to support the most promising technologies that can make it to a patient, but also to vet that, and so that they have greater confidence when they go forward promoting their technology, that they actually have something that's marketable. I think that's been very important.
And actually, one other thing we talked about in prep, and I think is important for people to know, we do so much more than just that.
Yeah.
So we help people, around, you mentioned conflicts earlier on, we help people navigate conflicts that might be embedded in them forming a company, embedded in them getting a patent on something, or just embedded in their role and relationship with a company that already exists. We can help with that. We can help you. And just because there's a conflict doesn't mean that's a full stop, too. I think people are afraid of the word conflicts, but conflicts are to be managed, right?
So one of the people who handled conflict of interest at my last institution used to say a conflict of interest isn't a bad thing. It means you're doing something exciting. People
Right.
are actually interested.
Right.
We just have to learn how to manage that conflict. And I've been on conflict of interest committees for 15 years, and I can think of 3 things that we could not find a way to avoid that conflict. And those are some very unique situations. So it is not about gatekeeping and not about scaring, it's about enabling.
Yeah.
And I want to follow up on something you said, understanding the markets and the need, and for life sciences, the reimbursement rates. That's something that not only we have to understand, we have to mentor and educate our researchers and PIs. Not that they shouldn't do research that has no commercial potential, but they should understand that if they want to make an impact, they have to look at the things that have interest and marketability. An old boss of mine used to say in very small groupings, and he'd say, if this gets out that I said this, I'll get in trouble. He said, if all that you've ever done is published, you're a failure. Which is a pretty scary thing to say in academia, but he had come from industry to academia, and he was serious. He said, if you really want to make an impact, you got to do more than publish. And so that's part of what we've got to educate, and not everyone wants to make an impact, and that's fine. But part of what we have to educate on is there a market? What's the competition? Just because you told me your patients want it is not sufficient.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But I do want to pivot because we've sort of beat up on patents a little bit, that it's not just patents. So I'll turn to the patent attorney. One of the things I want to talk about you that's changed is, to their point, when we first started, it was like, is this patentable? And that was it. Now we've gone to, let's start a patent landscape. Let's think about what the science needs to do to get better and broader claims, because we have analyzed the market. What have you seen changed in how you guys work with tech transfer offices around IP?
Yes, I think that the field has become much more sophisticated. Maybe in the past, mostly driven by inventors. They just wanted to get a patent, right? They want to put that little plaque on the wall with their name on, which is great, but that plaque is not going to walk out of their offices and commercialize it itself, right? Somebody has to do it. And I always tell people that patents are business tools. If there's no business model behind a patent, what's the real point of engaging in this exercise, which is expensive? It's costly. Especially if you go big, if you're going to many different countries. So generally, when we work with the tech transfer department, they provide us with a disclosure, and which has to be already been vetted by the tech transfer department, and they think there's something there, and they want our opinion. So we review it, and first of all, we identify which is potentially patentable, which may not be patentable at all, right? It may be data, it may be know-how, it may be some invention that's not it's protectable, but it's not commercializable. So we have this conversation with the tech transfer department saying, this is the disclosure, this is what we have identified to be patentable. Is that something you're interested in? Because of course, I have some business sense because I worked in the pharmaceutical industry before becoming an attorney. So I kind of understand how the industry works. But I want to hear from them their thoughts on what we have identified to be an invention. And then we go into another chapter, which is talking to the inventor or to the innovator, because we need to get their feedback, right? Because sometimes the invention disclosure is not as complete as it should be. They say, oh no, I've been working on something else. Oh no, I took another approach and I have some other results. And we have to have a very frank and clear discussion with them about what innovation is. Nobody wants to hear that their baby may not be the prettiest one in the room, but even if we identify that the disclosure is not patentable, that's not the end of the world. The conversation can go in many different ways. Is it not patentable because it's data or know-how, and therefore the way forward is basically partner with the industry, where the industry will benefit from the knowledge that this innovator or researcher has identified? Or is maybe the invention or the disclosure not patentable right now because it's very generic? It's kind of like entry into the field, so you don't have reagents, you don't have tool compounds, you don't have much. So we talk to them about what are the next steps that need to be done in order to turn that into something that can be commercializable? If it's an antibody-based technology, how long until you actually get antibodies? What kind of models, animal studies are you planning on doing? We have this conversation, and it educates a researcher, and I think they actually benefit a lot from that, and they're very grateful because they know all about their science. They're the world experts, but they don't necessarily most of them don't have a commercial approach to their research. Some of them are very knowledgeable. They have created 3 or 4 companies. They know exactly what they need to put on the table to attract investors, but some of them need guidance. And I think the tech transfer department does a great job in terms of holding their hands and saying, look, this is what you need to get your research from turn something that would be publishable to something that can be protectable or patentable or commercializable.
And have you seen more openness and willingness to listen to that over the years? From the inventors, not from the tech transfer office.
Yeah. I think I do. I actually, when I was getting my PhD, my advisor was one of the first ones who created a company, and that was kind of like a dirty word because most other professors didn't want to have anything to do with industry. Oh, it's a dirty business. I want to stay pure in my
dark side.
Yes,
I want to be in my ivory tower by myself. Until they start realizing, frankly, that there was money involved and it could, get consulting fees and their technology would be out there. Suddenly they would open the Aldrich brochure. It's like, oh, my reagents is for sale here. So they start getting more interested. So I think they're actually very interested in figuring out how to develop their invention to something that's actually commercializable. And they appreciate that. They are scientists, right? So they don't want to be told yes or no without some kind of explanation. They really appreciate the feedback from the tech transfer department and from the IP attorney on what can be protected or not and how to get there.
You mentioned the dark side. And again, same thing. Been doing this a long time. And I would say 95% of the professors were much like the VPR I talked about. And in the last few years, as there's been more involvement, particularly from investors and not just pharma, I've had investors come to me and say, introduce me to your most interesting PIs. I'm going to tell them how rich I'm going to make them. And I've looked at them and I've said, if they wanted to be rich, they wouldn't work in a children's hospital. On the other hand, and this gets back to the earlier point, tell them you'll bring them funding for their research. Tell them you will help cure the kids that they see suffering. Make them famous for that. But mostly bring them the funding so that they can help the patients they see. And again, I came from a university, so not everything I used to do was life sciences, although there was a large hospital. But I'm in a children's hospital. I do have occasional PIs who ask me whether they'll be able to buy a really nice sports car if this works out, but that's really the minority. The majority of them want to see impact, and that's what drives our offices.
And I just want to jump in and mention one of the things we talked about in prep is how the measuring of our impact hasn't been adjusted over time. I don't think, or at least not fully, because people are just like, how many patents did you file? How many disclosures did you get? And like, okay, here, I'll give you the numbers and I can get them up. I could get them up, but the reality is the value of what we do is getting this stuff to the people who need it, truly translating it.
So I will tell you one of the things we're starting to track at CHOP, not just in tech transfer, is how many patients have been in clinical trials. Not only for our IP, but on our campus. How many patients are our therapies reaching? So now that I've talked about the dark side and the fact that we aren't here to make our PIs rich, talk about how do you convince PIs to work with startups, which is very different than pharma, right? Pharma, it can be more of a handoff and sponsored research. With a startup, we're going to require a lot of work from the inventor or their grad student or something. What's the pitch you make to them?
Are you asking the investor or are you asking
I'm asking Greg, the investor.
Yeah.
Asking the real dark side.
Well, no, because like I said, 25 years ago was the dark side. Now, we have, particularly the younger generation, faculty who have had tenure for a long time and have a lot of grants are very happy, but their postdocs and grad students are thinking, I may never get tenure. I may never have impact. And I have more of them coming to us and say, I want to be involved in a startup. I want to move to industry because I don't think I'll get tenure or I don't think that's the best way to do it. So how are you working with them, selling the PIs who are happy to spend time and then tempering the expectations the grad students will think, well, if I join a startup, I'll be rich in 6 months.
Yeah, that's a good question. First off, it is true that the younger generation is much more entrepreneurial than Gen X and baby boomers. That's one trend in society that is playing out. I'm watching it in my own children. You combine that with the fact that the data just suggests that if you have a doctorate degree, that there are no faculty positions. People aren't retiring fast enough. They will have careers in industry.
Yep.
And they're being encouraged to do so. When I was in grad school, he said, well, if it doesn't work out, Greg, you'll make a lot of money in industry. Like, that was a horrible thing that could happen to me, the worst thing that could happen. But now many people going through school realize they're going to have to go in industry, and a lot of them have a bent for entrepreneurship. So I actually prefer to see this because the principal investigator who tries to be their own CEO, especially in the companies we invest in. We do a lot of med tech and healthcare IT. You have to go commercial. So it's not just enough to get through a clinical trial and then you have someone come do the phase 3 for you. So you can't really do that as a full-time professor, writing grants and teaching, et cetera. So having that trusted business-oriented or industry-minded graduate student that really understands the technology and can really carry that torch, maintain that good relationship with the PI, they're a real resource into the startup ecosystem. Some of them actually have business undergrad degrees, et cetera, and then you can partner them with right mentoring and coaching on the outside. We'll try to make those connections to make it a more investable company. Oftentimes, you have to look at that individual and you have to have the hard conversation that, do you want to be successful? Because if you want to be successful, the best thing that you could do when you form this company is to hire a business-oriented CEO and be the chief scientific officer, be the chief technical officer, take this ride, learn these skills. You tell them, it's just like grad school. You're going to get a whole nother degree. It's quite, it's hand-to-hand combat. It's real life learning. Some decide to take that good advice, and they tend to get further, in terms of raising money, et cetera. And some decide to go it alone, and oftentimes that's not the most successful route to raise money, because as you know, once you get past your seed funding, your internal grant programs, or even SBIRs, they can win SBIRs. They think they have it all figured out. But when you go out to sophisticated angel groups, early stage VCs, it's all about team. It's all about the team. We get to see a lot of great technology. It comes down to the team, the experience of the team. And unless you're literally a unicorn, you're better off partnering and building, explaining to them this is a real team sport,
yep.
Right? Like, this is really interdisciplinary science, but it's, this guy's been doing business for 20 years, you've been studying this problem for 20 years, you guys need to, make that connection.
Spend your time on what you're best at. Yeah. Don't try to spread yourself thin by learning an entirely new profession while trying to run the science at the same time. Spend your time running the science and don't waste your time on the business at this point. Spend a little bit of time learning from the mentor. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely.
And I'll add, the investors aren't wrong. They're wrong. They don't understand my technology. It was your job. It was your job to make sure that they understood your technology. And if they're telling you that you're overlooking something about the value, pay attention to it too. I mean, that's just free advice.
Yeah, because for early stage investors, so PIs and novice entrepreneurs have really the wrong idea about early stage investors. We want people to win. We want to invest. Now, we have standards that we have to meet, so we do a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring, a lot of free consulting. There's companies I have followed for 2 years before they met the standard for investment, but it's not like we just sent them off. We're like, okay, here's the punch list. Here's the things that you need to figure out. This is a really promising technology. Figure this out, and when you hit the standard, we would love to invest, right? So it's like grant writing. You learn to grant write from older peers. You get your lumps with your old pink sheets, and eventually you get far enough that along that you get success. You get to serve on study section. You really understand the process. Fundraising is that process. Engaging with investors, getting that feedback, and the no is difficult to hear. These are highly successful people. They don't hear no very often. They think they understand, but they're not quite there yet. And hopefully they run into investors that are trying to foster that deal flow and try to develop that asset, because it's an asset to us too, right? Like I'd love to see companies progress and you see them grow, and when they hit the mark, people are happy to provide money. People that don't take the advice and keep banging their head up against the wall, and then they get bitter about it, and then they tell their friends, so this was a waste of time. So, basically trying to, and it works within the tech transfer office, setting those expectations. We try, when we're dealing with first-time founders, to set, we talk about the process of fundraising before we get into the specifics of whether you meet the standard or not. Like, if you're a first-time entrepreneur, let me tell you how fundraising kind of works, right? And you can set that expectation that this is feedback, like getting your grant, pink sheets back, and now you need more pilot data. And when you kind of lay out that analogy, it's just like grant funding where you need a business, you need pilot data. Do we have some, appropriate science? Do we have appropriate marketing data to build that case and build that thesis that eventually then people will say, yeah, this lines up, this makes sense for us to invest.
And this is a way that we've grown in adding value, is working more and more and more with investors to make sure people understand why they're raising money, have a good narrative around why they're raising money, how much money they need to raise, and what happens when they get to that amount of money. It's not just, we need so-and-so $1 million. I mean, why? And what happens then? And the investors can be a really critical part of our team to help us build that narrative and map things out and make sure that they really will catch the baby.
So I want to, yep.
I have a question. Are you taking questions while?
Go ahead, yeah, absolutely, sure.
I'm curious, what is your experience? Let's say that the investigator, the inventor is in academia, or let's say it's he or she, they are starting a new company. What's the typical funding situation? Getting to the points what you, for example, are talking about, the milestones that you want to see, and you say that this done, then I'm interested. Usually that's the value.
So I'll start with the answer. I mean, it's the answer to everything. It depends. It depends. It depends on the market. It depends on how far away you are from a value inflection point. It depends on the technology we were talking about. We've seen technologies come, go, hot, cold. You're in oncology. Everybody's in oncology, and then it was like, only just this very specific, aspect, inflammation, hot right now, other, it's just totally depends. But I think the funding situation overall globally is very focused on AI right now. 50% of all investments in the US, and I believe worldwide as well, went into AI over the Q1 at least of 2025, or Q4 of 2025. So for biotech, there's been a bit of an attrition. Let him talk a bit more on that.
Yeah, I'll give you my experience. So my experience is, so let's say we have that prototypical company, inventor, founder-led company, okay? So typically they come out, they think they're ready to go commercial, and they're not. Because when the academic science is done, the commercial science is just beginning, right? Yep. And so how do they effectively bridge that gap? So the typical way, the best way for them to bridge that gap is to go for SBIR funding. Okay, so SBIR funding, federal grant, less competitive than an R award, but really focused on that translational research that bridges the pure academic. Okay, you can get a lot of mileage for that, and it's also a very important external validation for the company's technology, because there's some other sources. foundations, disease-specific foundations will often fund small startups, do very specific projects because they understand the valley of death is that translational research that very few people want to fund. There are also small programs. BioStrategy Partners has one.
The Germinator program.
The Germinator program.
Yep.
We, as an early stage investor, have an early stage investment program to try to bridge those gaps, right? Those gaps that, typically there's some data that you need so that we could evaluate in due diligence whether or not this is a good investment. We can provide a small amount of money to get that answer to that very specific question about whether or not you're ready for a larger investment. People also raise money from friends and family and high net worth individuals that, attending events that BioStrategy Partners puts on, other accelerators, getting to meet investors very early on is important. You don't want to first meet an investor with your hand out asking for money. Be part of the community, let people know you, they watch you over time and see the progress that you're making or not making, and then that helps open doors. So then once you kind of bridge that, you work your way up the food chain. So you would go to someone like Ben Franklin Technology Partners. You would go to one of the 3 greenhouses. The local one here is BioAdvance. We're in Harrisburg. So there are high risk-taking organizations that put very early money in. Okay, and it's an ecosystem, and you just literally walk up that chain. It's really hard. Most companies, this is where they fall out. But that's where the team really matters. So, that investigator, in order to really do an SBI, they all want to do SSTRs, but the funding rates are terrible compared to SBIRs. And the catch is that you can't work for the university full time to make that application, which is, so the competitive advantage for a company is to partner early with that business partner so that you can host one of those applications, one of those grants. Meanwhile, they're building that business case. They're talking to investors. Why the CSO essentially is in the lab. They're out building that case, networking, and paving the way to help secure funds to bridge that valley of death. Yeah.
I want to add that all of the funds that you mentioned, Ben Franklin, Life Sciences Greenhouse, BioAdvance, they're really great about giving good feedback too. Yeah. Generally, as a community, I think that's a huge asset that we have. They leave you in a better place than they found you. So you'll walk out, Todd, did you? Oh, so you'll walk out having a sense of when you would be fundable, or why they're passing. What part of your storytelling didn't catch? What might you be overlooking? So I think and that's why I think BioStrategy Partners, that's how we can help, and that's how our offices help too, is we will ask them to sit down with you and look at your stuff, and generally they'll do us the favor unless there's like, oh, we're totally out of that space. And we can get that great feedback and help you map out a plan. If they're not there yet, well then how do we get there? And then we go to the stuff that Craig was mentioning about foundations and patient advocacy groups.
Just a quick comment. So I was talking to an entrepreneur this morning who walked through their technology and said, so how much do you think I can raise around this? And I said, that's the wrong question. The question is, how much do you need to get to the next value inflection point? You need to justify the raise. It's not whether or not this technology is worth X dollars to raise. Yeah. The question is, is this stage-wise, stepwise?
I mean, I would have been like, you tell me. You tell me where you need to get, how you're going to get there, and then.
My main point is that even entrepreneurs don't quite always understand, especially early young folks, don't always understand that process of justification of a fundraise. And if you get an SBIR, great, you go to an angel and say, can you match this? They often, that's a great validation, but it still needs to be justified. How much money do you need to get to the point where you're going to move the technology to be able to raise the next round?
Yeah.
So I actually want to go a little earlier than everyone has talked about and answered your question. And one of the other biggest changes I've seen in the last 15 years is internal funding. There are a lot more universities and hospitals that have often called gap funds. So they've identified a technology that may have some commercial potential, but they realize there's a gap there. How much money is it going to take to get these guys interested, or a large pharma. So there you see universities and hospitals putting together sometimes tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds, sometimes tens of millions of dollars, and picking technologies or groups of technologies within their campuses and trying to de-risk them because they know it's not ready for these guys and it's not ready for anyone else. So, you know, I'll just say at CHOP, we have some things where we will take things into a phase 1 clinical trial using internal funds. I've seen other institutions, and there's a whole group called InnovaSource, and this is all that they do. InnovaSource sort of maps and helps with gap funding at universities all over the country. And they talk about best practices. The first best practice is don't do it on your own. Universities should not be picking their own winners by just drinking their own Kool-Aid. So the best ones will say, there's an RFP or there's a process, and bringing in Greg's team and maybe someone from a pharma or maybe another investor to say, do you think this has commercial legs? And to Todd's point, what's the next inflection point?
Yeah.
And if someone says, if you show me this data, I think we can spin that out, or we're interested in licensing it, that's an easy calculation. I go to the PI and say, what's it going to take to get that data?
That's exactly what we do, bringing together a commercialization advisory board to rub brain cells together and say, is it worth it? Where are we headed? How do we get there? And it's got VCs on it, and it's got our clinical experts and our scientific experts, and it's got company experts, and it's important. It's important.
But then we're spending our own money in many cases, which did not exist 15 years ago. And 25 years ago, we'd work with our IP attorney, and like you said, we'd show a patent and we'd hope pharma would license it. Pharma's like, I need to see a lot more data. Too many things are failing, too many things take too long, so we have to de-risk more internally. It's a huge cost to the institutions, and it's got to be mission-based and not money-based. But that is a huge change in the amount of early-stage capital that institutions are putting behind their own research to get it to a point to make it sometimes even patentable. Sometimes we don't have enough data to file IP.
I was going to jump in and mention how
so
I use my
that's
counsel
the first milestone.
there a lot now too. So Dominguez and I get on the phone and be like, okay, maybe it's not now, but when could it be patentable? Or you're going to get a patent, but it's going to be more narrow than you're thinking, and add this data in, and and we have to balance. We need to publish. You have to publish to get students. You have to publish to get grants. Your students need to graduate, but at the same time, we want to no more patents as a prize, right? Yeah.
So I visited the University of Utah many, many years ago, and they had one of these programs, and they had a local VC. Now, they were more software than anything else, and this local VC would literally be on there, and he'd say, if you could show me that data, we'll put $250,000 and stand up a company. $250,000 isn't going to touch a life science company, but it's good for a software company. And again, they would calculate. If we put $50,000 into a project to get that data, if the data doesn't work, we can stop filing IP. Might save us 50 grand over the time, right? But if the data is positive, we've got a commitment. That's the easiest gap fund decision in the world to make, right? Usually we don't get that clean an answer. But that's one of the biggest changes from a funding level, is the amount of money that academia and hospitals are putting into translational research versus just standing up the labs or helping people get tenure or anything else. They are really focusing their internal funding on impact. Again, what we've talked about, this is all about impact. It's not about we can make a lot of money, because most tech transfer offices don't ever, but we want to see our kids cured.
Well,
so putting our money into the labs that can lead to something commercial, which might lead to a product to cure our kids.
And the end point isn't always just patent product gets to market. It can be, we can get somebody to fund the research, we can get somebody to fund the trials, and maybe it doesn't ever result in a patent, but we've actually got the answers to those critical questions, and we probably did get closer to an answer about what is the target for this disease, or how would we diagnose these patients and stuff like that. So I saw Vera had her hand up as well. So I'm sorry, I don't want to skip you, but yeah.
grants that you used to get easily, now we look for the data. I represent the Bird Foundation, and the way they scrutinize every company right now is looking at the data and then looking at what they were able to raise. So it has to start from the beginning, as you mentioned about the plan. It's not about the patent, it's about the plan around it and what kind of data you're going to ask for and generate to be able to actually do all those other steps afterwards.
And not just Bird Foundation, NIH funding. There are a lot of NIH grants like ARPA-H that are dedicated to, we want to see impact. We don't want to see papers. We want to see this make a broader impact on the community.
University-wide, we're starting to get solicitations from different companies saying, apply to us, we'll give you a grant based on, your application. Does it overlap with something that we do? I understand that one of the red flags that we as tech transfer officers should be looking for is, do they want a piece of the IP? But do you know, have you come up with like a list of other things that are red flags that I should be looking for?
I wouldn't call it a red flag if they want a piece of the IP. 100% of zero is zero. If they can actually give you translational funding that'll get the research to the people who need it, we'll have a talk about a strategy for making that work. And of course, there's other red flags. We were talking about, you go ahead.
No.
Conflicting agreements.
So that was a whole other thing that our offices have become about, is conflicting agreements. And this is less about commercialization and more about protecting our IP or our PIs.
Oh, and the publication clauses and stuff like that.
So not just grant funding and not just companies, disease foundations who want a cut of anything positive that comes out of it, that can be fine. But I've also seen ones where the disease foundation has to approve the license. They're not a party to the license.
I know who he's talking about.
Well, there are multiple, but they're not a party to the license, and they have to approve it. And if we have not licensed, I just read one of these the other day, if we've not licensed the technology within 2 years, they can take assignment.
Absurd.
That makes it really hard for us to plan. That makes it really difficult for us to want to invest in filing IP. If in 2 years, which would be a very short time, they can take it away. So there's a lot of different types of agreements that can impact how we do our business.
How they're going to use your data, who's going to own the data.
Publication
rights.
If you really want to upset your PI, tell them they can't publish. That's sort of antithetical, right?
Yeah, and one thing that I have observed many times is that one of the tasks of the tech transfer department is actually to manage the relationship between the researcher and the company, because sometimes the researcher actually founds the company, which is great, but sometimes their objectives diverge from the company, and you want to make sure that that relationship is preserved to the best of everybody's interests, so they can collaborate, because many times the researcher just walks away from the collaboration, and that's the end of it, because the know-how just dries up and the company can't continue inventing. So that's a very important task for the tech transfer department, because it involves a lot of personal relationships, which is tricky. Science is easy, people are difficult.
Nothing more true has ever been said. And sometimes it's not a single agreement. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with one agreement. And again, I've seen this recently. PI got sponsored research funding from a company, and under that, the company gets the first option to license the IP. To Heather's point, that's perfect. We love that.
Was there a material transfer agreement? I knew it.
And then the PI gets a material from another company that they want to use in that research, and of course, that company wants an option. And I'm like, I can't promise the first option to two people. Two people can't use the car on a Friday night for separate dates. And I've had to explain that to PIs. They're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, we've already promised it to one. We can't promise it to another. Well, fix this. An even more insidious one is, again, it's a disease foundation, which will often say, you can't give away a free license, and if you choose not to file IP, you have to give it to us, which again, may be reasonable terms in and of itself. And then the PI wants to work with another group, whether it's an MTA or a CDA or something, and that company wants what we call a NERF, a non-exclusive royalty-free license. We don't like to give them, but we can't in the case of this funding. And I had to have that conversation with the PI and say, you either have to find entirely different funding for this project, or it's going to have to shift because these two agreements, if we do this, we're in breach of the first one. And again, they're like, fix it. And I'm like, but those are things I never thought about 25 years ago, right? I thought, Domingo, is there IP I can file? And then someone must love it. I hadn't thought about these complexities. And part of it is because it's not just tech transfer that's changed in the last 5, 10, 25 years. Since the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation earned $1 billion, every foundation, whether it's a disease or family, wants a cut of the action. And again, I'm not going to argue whether that's appropriate or not. But the other terms that they've added has made our job harder to do, which means it's not going to get the therapies that they want to treat their patients in whatever disease foundation. It's not about the money, it's about sometimes the control and just setting up terms that we know our commercial partner's not going to, we have to show all the terms in the license to this disease foundation. Well, the commercial partner doesn't want us to do that.
Yeah.
There's no privity of contract, there's no confidentiality. They don't want a third party weighing in on it. So that's another thing that we have to manage in our office and try to talk about what's a reasonable expectation between 4 different partners: the funder, the PI, the licensee, and us.
And the person who gave you the materials. And
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
You mentioned these grants that have the clauses that say, it's floofy, I guess. Anything that like comes out of the research, any intellectual property that comes out of the research, we get a portion. That can sometimes be really difficult to define. You need to be very, very clear where the fences are if you're going to agree to it. Mm-hmm. If you're going to succumb to those terms because the stuff simply won't move forward without doing that agreement, you need to make sure you really pay attention to how you're defining, what that IP is, how you're gating that. Because on one hand, they'll say everything. Nobody fights about money until there is some. But as soon as there is some, you can bet they're going to pull out your publication that led to some of the foundation of this work, and they're going to say, yeah, there you go, right there. Yeah.
So I want to shift a little bit to as we talked about lots of partners, how have things changed? So we engage you. You file IP for us. We license to large pharma X. Their attorneys want to get involved as well. I have a fairly simple, I'm a simple guy. In all of our licenses, we control IP. Our attorney files it, period. However, we'll listen to whatever you want to say, and as long as what you want us to do during prosecution isn't inappropriate, incorrect, and doesn't harm us, and you're paying, we're pretty open to it, right? You probably, as the licensee, have a better idea of where the claims should go because you know what the eventual product looks like. So how has interactions between, first of all, have you been dragged into more discussions with licensees than you used to? And how are those interactions going when you're representing the tech transfer office, but also have to working very closely with either internal or external counsel from licensees?
I would say it's really case dependent. We have worked either way. For example, let's say we represent the university. Sometimes we prosecute the applications, we get input from the licensee, and most of the times we follow their recommendations unless there's something clearly wrong or a little suspicious. No, I wouldn't say suspicious, but maybe they overlooked an issue, so we go back to them. And sometimes it's the other way around. The prosecution is transferred to the licensee, and then we review the responses before they are filed to make sure the university is not being harmed. I think that basically it's the difference is in the relationship between the licensee and the university. Sometimes I find that licensees are very open with the university. Of course, it's the licensee's business, so they're not going to review everything to the university, but they give the university a pretty good idea of what's going on. This is what we're working on, this is what we want to develop, and that makes prosecution so much easier because they understand the end game. But sometimes they keep it really secretive. It makes it hard to figure out what's going on. But ultimately, we have to make sure that the filing doesn't hurt the university. The rights are preserved. If anything peculiar comes up, we have to go back to the licensee and say, hey, you recommended this, but this is not going to work for this and this reason. And there's an exchange. And I find that most of the time, it's very productive. But once again, if the licensee has ultimate motives that is not revealing to the university, that's where the problems arise.
How many of you who aren't in tech transfer have worked with tech transfer offices before? And have you seen it change over the years? I don't know how long you've been doing it.
Well, we are just a startup from spin out from Temple like 2 years ago. When I talk to a lot of investors have same situations, like everybody asks me for more data. But for problem for me is if I don't have money, how could I get more data? So how can I solve that?
It is a catch-22.
You have the internal money.
Well, and I'll tell you, the internal money becomes difficult when it's a startup, right? It's no longer investing in our research, it's investing in a company. And there are institutions that do that, that do have actually investment funds versus gap funds. But there are different rules around that and a lot more scrutiny. It's easier to give money to PIs internally to de-risk their technologies. You make your PIs happy, right? That's a secondary benefit of that. Even if it doesn't advance things commercially, your PIs love you. You show that you're supporting research. When it goes outside of the institution, that sometimes can cause jealousy. Why aren't you investing that money in research here? Why are you giving it to companies? So once you're in a company, it does change. And there are institutions that do investing. CHOP has done that off and on over the years. But that's a very different dynamic. The scrutiny is higher. The process is different.
And if the company invests back into university through an SRA, is that not beneficial for the university?
That is absolutely beneficial, and that's one of the biggest reasons we talk about it. So the question was, doesn't that money sometimes come back to the university through an SRA? And the answer is absolutely. So not only our money, which then looks a little circular, but that's a great argument for why we create spin-outs that can attract other investment. So let's say a company spins out, Greg spins it out, he raises $2 million, we kick in $250,000 of it, and $300,000 comes back in sponsored research. That's a huge win. Now, if the company spins out, we give it $250 and it just gives $250 back to us, it can look a little fishy, and it's just not efficient, right? So it is absolutely a great reason, not why we invest, but why we spin out companies. And investment can be part of that.
Lack of SBIRs right now without the reauthorizations gumming a lot of this up, right? So what are we hearing from Washington? Are they going to renew?
We hear that they're moving in that direction. Washington is really hard to predict is a good word at this point. So I will say, you know, we talked about our offices being about driving sponsored research and collaboration. When we've looked, the majority of the sponsored research that has come into places like CHOP over the years have been from our startups. If we license to Pfizer, Pfizer has all the capabilities in the world. They might sponsor a little bit because they need the PI. If I license to a startup, they don't have their own labs because they can't all afford to move in here yet. So a lot of times they will sponsor. And sometimes it's our money, but sometimes it's the money we've helped them raise because we gave them gap funding to get to a certain point. But yeah, startups are wonderful for bringing sponsored research, which helps the technology move forward, and we're sure it is. From a diligence standpoint, we see what's happening. But it can't be all our money, or just... hopefully they don't have to spend a lot of money on the attorneys transactionally just on IP because that's important.
A lot of the firms, even Saul, I believe, have ways that they can help support early stage companies and defer costs and help them secure IP. I don't think you just fall into the chute. I think they have to make discretionary decisions. Do you guys still do some of your startup supporting functions? Yeah.
Yes. We have a program called RAM program, which is a program that gives support to startup companies. So basically, if we believe in the company, we waive a certain level of legal charges, because of course, up front, a small company can't go bankrupt because it spends all its money on attorneys. And of course, this money has to be the investment has to be carefully thought, because as a small company, you're not going to spend money on labor employment attorneys, right? Because you have one employee who is the founder. Of course, there's no labor employment problems there. The most important thing would be, for example, corporate and IP. And then later on, you start becoming bigger and you have other concerns. But yeah, it's a program where we link you with attorneys who are used to working with small companies, because obviously also you have to work with somebody who knows what your problems are, right? You're not IBM, you're a startup.
One more question, anything? Yes?
What's the trend with tech transfer offices working very closely with a couple of folks like Greg, investment? Because VC Group A and VC Group B, they're getting more in bed there?
We would love to. Mostly because, again, we're trying to make determinations of whether there's commercial potential. If Greg says there is and I'm willing to invest in it, or this is where you need to get to, and then I'm willing to invest, that helps our risk profile, right? So we love to have, and Heather talked about different committees and groups where there's people from industry and investors helping to review technologies. The more we can do that, the less guesswork, and I'll say this, it's a little bit of CYA for us. If we say there's nothing there, and the PI says, well, you're just wrong, you don't know what you're talking about, you're a pencil pusher, and we say, we have a committee with Dr. So-and-so from this pharma, Dr. So-and-so from this venture capital, and Dr. So, and they all said it's nothing there. We can say, it wasn't just us, right? So it helps us make decisions really, and it helps us find a quicker path because we're getting people an earlier look. And it also helps a little bit CYA, and hopefully we can share the input with that PI, because maybe it's just not ready yet. Maybe it's not a no, but it's a not yet. And that feedback can help guide them to the experiments that will get to commercial versus get to the next paper, because it's not always the same thing.
And I think it helps potentially line up a partner. I mean, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you guys like to hear it because it can be a way to kind of get a little bit of deal flow, or?
Oh, it's a great source of deal flow. Yeah, so, this is something that's still in transition. A lot of venture capitalists do not like to invest in companies with university licenses. And not that long ago, that was the majority. That has changed. But now you're starting to see that early stage investor starting to integrate more into the university, where 15 years ago, you got a university license. We don't invest. When I went out raising for my startup in 2007 timeframe, if I have a university license, we don't do university license companies, right? So you don't hear that now. People have gotten over that because, quite frankly, the universities are doing a better job with their licenses. I don't have to send people back and say, you got to renegotiate your university license because this company is now uninvestable because it has terms that are not market rate, right? So they've gotten better at writing the licenses, and that's removed a lot of barrier to investing in startups with a university license. So now it's becoming more of a partnership, where I would say 20 years ago it was almost adversarial. At least that was my experience.
Which doesn't help anyone.
Right.
These are like marriages. These are long-term relationships. Licenses can last 20 years. I mean, that's the patent life, right? We hope they do. So yeah, it is better not to start as adversaries, because it's not fun. It's not fun for you. It's not fun for you, it's not fun for the PI because they get put in the middle. So yeah, I mean, that is one thing I think we continue to try to do is while we have certain things we have to meet regulatory wise, et cetera, trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the investor to understand what they need, because frankly, any one technology we have, we don't usually have 5 people looking at it. So if we can get one, we're going to try to find a way to work together if at all possible.
And I know we do have to end soon, by the way, and everybody should hang out and get to know each other a bit. But I think it prevents us from having the preterm births, right? Having the technologies that spin out before they should spin out, before they've really thought about what's their market, before they've really thought about what's their value inflection point, who's gonna invest in this, why, what are your reimbursements, and I think that has been a trend in our institutions as well, to do more of an incubator model where we try to get things to a real proper state to become part of a company and help bring in the teams for the companies and help bring in the investors because they've already heard it, and they heard it before it was a company that didn't have a really good plan. Yeah.
And if a company does well, there are places like BioLabs where they can come and set up space. So thank you to our hosts.
Thank you so much to our hosts. Thank you to all of our sponsors. I hope everybody will hang out for a while and get to know each other. We never talked about how we value data, but that could be another be another PKS someday.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
Thank you.